righty. Thanks all for joining Public Rail Now this evening. I'm Tabitha Tripp, and I am the campaign director with Public Rail Now. And we are here to chat with some railroaders about AI and automation in the rail industry. And Nick, you want to wave to the crowd? That's Nick. And we got Matthew, and we've got Jacob Moe, and possibly David Turnpin. And if you are a railroader and want to speak up, drop your name in the chat so I know who you are and can unmute you. Um, so yeah, this has become quite a hot button issue with railroaders, and we thought it would be an interesting conversation to hear from railroaders directly instead of hearing from talking heads of the company. And so I'm just curious, you guys, I'm going to throw out a question, and whoever wants to talk first is great. When you hear about the company that you work for, and you don't have to mention anybody's name, and they talk about automation or they talk about AI, what's the first thing that goes through your head, and what's the thing that you don't say out loud?
I don't know, Matt. I'll go first and see how much hot water I get myself in. Um, but I think snake oil is sort of like the main thing I think about, just because I haven't been in the industry that long, um, less than a decade all told, and even in that short amount of time, I feel like I've seen tons and tons of times where the industry or a specific carrier or something sort of touts something as this is the the next great thing, that this is the silver bullet, that this will, finally the railroads will just, be perfect after this. And that logic gets applied to like a whole range of stuff, whether it's um something as big as like the Union Pacific Norfolk Southern merger, or the increased usage of technology and the introduction of AI, but also even stuff like as simple as um like a basically like an internal company like rebrand, right? Or something like that, where it's, oh, we're a team now. And so it just feels to me like more of the AI is the sort of new shiny thing that will fix everything, but in reality is probably just going to paper over the continuing, growing cracks in the industry.
How about you, Matt?
I think it's important when we talk about AI that we understand what AI really is, because I see the label being misapplied in a lot of circumstances. AI, artificial intelligence, is electronic systems that actually make decisions. They can analyze the results of those decisions. They can see where mistakes were made, and they learn from that. They can either self-correct, or at minimum they can provide data where it can be seen where a correction is needed. um, and the label is getting applied a lot. I see people refer to the energy management systems that we have on locomotives as AI. They are not AI. They don't learn. They've been out there for 7, 8 years or more, and they haven't learned a damn thing. The only quote improvements that have come to those systems have come from changes in the actual programming from the companies that develop those systems. So I think that's important, particularly when we start talking to people and talking from a policy standpoint, understanding what AI actually is. As far as automation goes, when I hear that, I laugh. I laugh when mouthpieces like the Association of American Railroads come out there and talk about how AI is just around the corner. We're nowhere close. AI in order or automation in order for it to work is going to require that every other technological system that we already have in place that we're using on the railroad be working pretty much at 100%. And we have systems out there that have been in use for 40 or 50 years that still don't work properly. The systems that we've got out there, the auto control system, they're garbage in and garbage out. I have literally seen and experienced situations where these things have screwed up because the information that's put into them by the engineer at the start of the trip is not correct because the engineer didn't have the correct information. And that's what I'm talking about. The railroads can't even get the correct information to us as to what we have, what locomotives in our consists are working, how many cars that we have sometimes. There's still huge inaccuracies in this. And again, all the rest of the stuff we're already using has to be at or close to 100% before automation is going to work. It's actually kind of scary when you think about it, because they're going to try to push it forward, even knowing that every day we're dealing with inaccurate information.
Matt's raised a good point. If I could jump in with a concrete example that I've seen myself. First off, he's absolutely right about the AI thing. My dad's a computer science teacher, and he'd kill me if I didn't make the caveat that none of this is really actually artificial intelligence. But not that I really understand what he's talking about when he says that. But the point about like the inaccurate information. So Matt's exactly right. Like one of the things that they're pushing out now is the 0 to 0 trip optimizers stuff, where now the idea is you feed all the information to the computer system about how many locomotives, how many cars, what tonnage, all that stuff, and then it is going to start the train. It's going to speed it up and slow it down and negotiate all of the hills and the changes in um, uh, track geometry and all that stuff, and it's going to stop itself again at the end. Um, well, I've been on the main line and I've heard the dispatcher call a passing train and say, "Hey, just so you know, you guys went through that scanner and you have 20 extra cars that weren't showing on your consist before. So, when they left, they thought they were at a certain tonnage and a certain length and a certain weight when they left the yard. Um, and then it's only after, a certain number of miles when they go through this scanner that then the dispatcher calls them and says, "Hey, just so you know, you have 20 extra cars and who knows how many extra tons." And so the computer system that they're being required to let run their train is operating 20 cars light from what it actually has. Um, so I think that's a really concrete example of what Matt's talking about.
Philip messaged me and said that they are a retired railroader. So, Philip, railroad perspective, or Jacob, or David, either one.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, good. Just to tag on to what's already been said, I'm an old feller. I'm in my 70s. When I was hired on, I worked under railroaders that had been there for years before me. The comment I'd like to make is current railroaders don't seem to be railroaders. They seem to be company-trained serfs, for lack of a better term, who will do the company line, whatever the consequence, because they don't know any better. Management appears to be more concerned with cost saving rather than growing the business. And as a last point, dispatchers don't seem to know their own territories. I doubt that they even travel out to actually see them anymore.
Generally, they don't.
Let's see. Jacob was next.
Hey, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I'm out here. I was looking for a mailbox, but anyway. Nick, your dad sounds like a really smart man. You should listen to him. It really, when you talk about what is AI, I find that a lot of people bring up that they just want to do AI and really just not understand what AI is, because the more I try to understand it, the less I think I understand what artificial intelligence is. When you study these algorithms, and what they're capable of doing, you realize that they're not very intelligent. So I don't know where the intelligence comes in, but when I hear the term, I just think it's a marketing strategy. Um, and I do work at a railroad where in an office setting, and when I hear we're going to get AI on this, it's basically another task for us to try to learn, or else, they might just find a reason to get rid of us. And that happens very much at my place of work. And I remember having to put in all my job titles or job descriptions and tasks into like a CSV or like an Excel file, and how much time I spend on them, and everything like that. I mean, it's funny because that's kind of why they have me there, is to create said AI, and really just to create the AI that will take my job away. But when they create those files, it's just something that they could say that, oh, we can consolidate all of these jobs together. And they have an AI that does it for them conveniently. So I get a little nervous when I hear the term AI, because it's something that I think people don't understand with the algorithms. But they don't want us to, I don't know. They don't really want it to be anything useful for us with our daily jobs. It's actually something that creates more trouble and forces that we have to combine. It's
Breaking up a little bit there. Okay, so I'm seeing now somebody's sending me a message that Zoom has decided that you can only private message me on the Zoom chat. Like, we're talking about AI and automation, and I'm getting very frustrated with Zoom. So anyways, how lovely. Phil, you had your hand up, and Mark has their hand up. Mark, if you are not a railroader, do you mind to hold your questions until the end? Philip, you want to go ahead and
Well, I don't know if this will allay the fears of the previous speaker, but it's my own belief, real or otherwise, that artificial intelligence really needs to be based on actual intelligence. That's kind of what I was leading up to with my previous statements. I don't think we have real railroaders at the helm anymore. They don't understand the stuff, and they can't possibly imagine how to insert artificial intelligence into a human form. I'll just shut up at that. I don't want to take up a lot of time.
oh, well,
I'd like to
we've got some
respond
time.
to that if I could.
Go for it, Matt.
It's true. The leadership on the railroads is completely lacking these days. When I started 23 years ago, we had bosses that came up from the ranks, and they knew you had a problem, you called them, you explained what the problem was, they'd give you a solution. Nowadays, most of the time, you call them up, you spend 20, 30, 40 minutes trying to explain to them what the problem is, and the answer that you end up getting is, well, do whatever you think you have to correct it, because they don't know. But by God, if you do that without talking to them first, you're in trouble. And I literally have told so many of our newer employees, I really feel for you, because there is a complete lack of leadership out here. You have no leadership on the railroad anymore, other than what you get from your peers, because the bosses just don't know.
Oh, hold on, Jacob, you went to mute. Is your cat on your?
Yeah, she's
There you
a little curious kitty. But I was just wanted to say, I was hearing some of these idea or these cases here. And, like in Nick's case, I don't think that's even AI. That's just some form of automation. I'm guessing they use those AEI readers, and those can be faulty. And I think, like what one of the other commentators said earlier, it's just that, we're not even there to even get automation correct. You really just need to take your time when you get those consists out, and you need to, check your T's or cross your T's and dot your I's. And I mean, people on the line of road, people that out there, I don't think they have the time to manage all of that. I mean, that's this what this great AI revolution was supposed to give, but it just actually creates problems. So, I mean, I feel it for the people out there, because it's not that easy to develop those concepts with just like the automation that we have. There are still problems. Luckily, we have people that are on top of it with dispatch, actually, mentioning something before something bad happens, catastrophic. So it's just kind of like, I just want to emphasize, it's just a marketing ploy, in my opinion, to find excuses to cut people's jobs, and just it's like almost like a convenient scapegoat to say, well, we're going to use this AI, and then once there are problems, then we have reasons to fire people. And I've seen that firsthand. It's there. Everyone's an advocate up front, and then when push comes to, oh well, why did these things happen? People start losing their jobs. They never want to blame the fact that it's the AI itself. That's all.
Pretty much the entire safety program with every railroad is employee blamed.
Yeah.
Instead of investigating to find the actual cause of an accident or an incident, we first have to blame the employee and never do actually solve the issue. That's a blatantly broad term, but I'm going to throw it out.
So I've got Thomas White on stack, who is a retired railroader. How about you, Tom? What do you think about AI automation?
Actually, not retired, just not employed by a railroad.
Apologies.
I quit being employed by a railroad when living in Seattle. BN told me that if I wanted to keep on working, it would be in Fort Worth, Texas. And I took 0.02 nanoseconds to decide between Fort Worth and Seattle, and said adios and became a consultant, which I still am. So we've been here before with CTC. CTC was a good idea in the 30s. By the 50s, they ran out of the places to install it that were a good idea. So the signal industry, which is now the computer industry, started hand-picking a couple of places in which they tore out tracks, put in CTC, tore out tracks, and still ran the same number of trains. Well, that's because after the war, there were fewer trains. So they started the myth, you put in CTC, you can rip out tracks. That sold a lot of CTC. The other thing it did was it provided the myth that with CTC, every meet would be a slider by, and that one dispatcher could handle 1,000 miles of track. There's been a meme on Facebook with a guy screaming into the radio to the dispatcher, "Acknowledge me." Well, that's where that comes from. So now we've got once again guys who want to get rich off techno stuff, who are convincing the railroad you can get rid of a whole bunch of people doing it, and it's not going to work. And probably just like CTC, it's going to come, and then the debris will have to be cleaned up later. At BN, we had to split jobs back apart and things like that. But it's more propaganda from guys who are rich and want to be richer by selling stuff that nobody needs.
Hey, Nick, do you want to just, did you have a list or do you want me to throw out a couple more? Oh, David, let's hear from David.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Actually, I work in the public sector. I work on a commuter rail at Chicago Metra. So it's not subject to the same dynamic as you all are facing in freight. But I got a couple of refugees from Amtrak. I'm the trainer in the substations department because we have an electric rail line. So it's electric power. It's also a slightly different dynamic than diesel rail. But I was talking about this conversation with some coworkers, trying to encourage them to join. And a couple of them, like I said, are refugees from Amtrak, and they were telling me about, I guess technically it's considered automation, but the application of automation into the maintenance routines in particular. And a lot of it has to do with, it seems like, replacement of lower level supervision, frontline supervision, to cut costs there primarily. But I think that, like a couple of the brothers have said here so far, there's this, or suggested anyway, that there's this, need to bring in capital to invest, raise stock prices, etc. And so you sell this facade that there's this technology out here that's going to allow us to cut costs, and you're going to boost the bottom line. And if they can put it into effect at all, it'll only be by reducing the number of hands on the job while still carrying the same loads, which is going to affect safety ultimately. Actually losing frontline supervision, not that I always get along with my frontline supervisors, but even then, they do things that are important, get us parts, tools, etc., plan jobs, because I don't have the authority to plan jobs, etc., and we need those jobs done. So even then, that's a negative impact on us, and I say that being a union brother, but so far it seems to be mostly just a lot of a really adverse impact for, even though it's really only tangential as far as where we're at in the public sector. But I've seen video footage of, I was hoping to hear from some folks from Track Gang where we're at, because I've seen video footage of these new machines that lay down track with the, they lay the ties, the rails, they spike, they unspike, everything, and it's increasingly sophisticated, the automation. I know that's not AI, it doesn't make decisions, but, those are high-paying jobs. A lot of people in the Track Gangs where we are, they only take summer work, but they'll work that. But that's that's big money for them and their families. And then so that stuff comes along, it's gonna eliminate the number of people doing that stuff. And like I was telling my coworkers, it's not that. Of course, it's backbreaking work, and and maybe it should be machines doing it. But then if we're making a decision like that, it's like, do I dam a river? Well, okay, I can put a generator there and produce electricity, but then if I affect all the farmers down below or the wildlife, except there's a consequence to these decisions, and it should be a collective decision, like we should be deciding what we're going to do, And I think one of the advantages of being a commuter railroad is actually, since it's a fairly efficient railroad, the one we work in, it's public owned, this is an example of what should be the way things are done. It's with the caveat that we don't have enough workers' voice in the decisions made, But this is the way things should be done. Anyway, thanks.
No, those were all great points. Nick, you want me to toss it back to you?
It's entirely up to you whether you want to get through more of your questions or you want to let railroaders just keep blabbering away.
I think people like to hear railroaders blabber, but
Sure.
I know I see that Ron's also on the call. And so Ron, just a heads up, we're having a little bit of difficulty with the chat. I don't know if you've gotten that information, but if you want to talk, just hit me up and I will unmute you, and if you want to show your pretty face, we can do that too. It is being recorded. Go ahead, Meg.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, so I think a lot of what people are discussing is um all circling around the same conclusion, which is that, the automation and then what they're calling AI, which we'll leave it up to the professors about whether or not that is or isn't really AI. But all of that is part and parcel of the playbook for corporate railroading at this point. Um, it's not unique in the sense of all of it is part of a scheme to try and pump up profit by speeding up operations, cutting costs, labor costs, maintenance costs, etc. And ultimately to really de-skill the workforce, because part of labor cost is also um, skilled humans to run a train or to lay track or to know how to fix a car or anything else. Skilled humans are expensive, and you got to train them. You got to send them to school, and you got to deal with, years and years of them not really knowing what they're doing before it finally starts to click for them. And so the one of the big problems that it was sort of apparent to me when I got sent to engineer school was and I'm lucky. The territory that I work on, we can't run a lot of these automated systems. So I actually had to learn how to handle a train, and to run a train and to um, deal with it manually. But a lot of the people I went to school with were expressing a lot of concerns to the instructor about, well, if it gets to the point where you're requiring me to use the automated system all the time, except for who knows, like maybe once a month or something like that, where I have to, run it manually to prove to myself I still can, then they're not going to be learning how to handle, weird situations when it kicks back into manual control in the middle of some really disastrous situation. So, I was just sort of going through the examples that I know of, that I can think of examples of, AI and or automation being used in some of the crafts that I know about. And there's probably plenty of examples that I don't know about where, yard masters or train dispatchers or those crafts where they are being, they're their own, there are specific AI or automated systems that are, who knows, telling them how to dispatch trains, or telling them how to set up meets, or telling them, how to build a switch list with the minimum number of moves possible or something. Um, but so for train and engine stuff, I mean, we've already talked about the automated energy management system, Trip Optimizer, and things like that. But the new one for us that we're seeing more and more of is rebuilt locomotives are coming out of the shop, freshly upgraded with a coat of paint on them and everything, with this AI listening system on it. This basically AI nanny cam that's listening to the radio transmission, and listening for keywords. And when it hears keywords, it starts um, listening very closely in order to basically try to turn you in for rules violations. So, the really concrete example I heard about was there was a train crew that, if you're communicating over the radio, backing up a train, you give car counts. You say you're good for 20 more cars, right? And the deal is, if the engineer doesn't hear another number before they've gone 10 car lengths, then they need to stop to make sure that they haven't run over their conductor, or the conductor's like hasn't fallen off the side of the train or something like that, right? Well, this crew was giving car counts over the radio, and then they changed to hand signals. They didn't announce that they were changing to hand signals over the radio, allegedly. And so what happened was the AI went, well, the last thing I heard was a 20 car count, and the train's now gone, half a mile without any more car counts. So these guys have violated a rule, and so it pinged management, and those guys got brought in. And but the point is, it those with like the increased usage of drones and everything creates this overwhelming sense that everything you're doing is being watched, not really to keep you safe, but in order to try to find ways to fire you. And that makes you start second guessing decisions. It makes you start getting paranoid. You're not focused on the task. And instead, you're starting to think about who's listening, who's watching, and how do I cover myself. For the maintenance away guys, there's been a ton of stuff already written about the automated track inspection, the idea that they can go even longer without a human actually looking at the track, but that now they can survey track with automated vehicles, with drones, etc., and that that technology will be able to catch defects the same way that a skilled maintenance away guy with 20 years on the job would be able to. For the carmen and the machinists, they have these train inspection portals where a train blasts through at who knows track speed, maybe 70 miles an hour, and there's cameras that are going to take photos of high quality photos of the whole train, and that's going to be able to find parts that are going bad, parts that need to be replaced, cars that need repair, locomotives that need maintenance, the same way that, again, a skilled car inspector, a skilled machinist going over a stationary train, a stationary track, taking their time would be able to. And so all of that stuff is an example of what they're trying to do is they're trying, to find this shortcut to replace people who know what they're doing and who are taking their time to make sure that they are making the right decision with equipment that not just is very, very expensive, has the potential to do some very, very expensive damage, but also can very seriously hurt people, not just railroaders, but people in the community, and that they're going to replace all of that experience with this automation, these AI systems, whatever, and that's their get rich quick scheme. And I think like any other get rich quick scheme, it's got some fundamental baked in problems here that they're not really grappling with.
So we've got Matt and Jacob. I am unfamiliar with Cesar. Do you all know who that person is? Are they a railroader?
He is one person. He may be.
He may be one of the.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
Cesar?
Yes.
Are you a railroader?
Yes, I am.
Well, you got the floor.
Okay, I just wanted to mention something. I work in the same company as David Turpin, and but I'm in the signal department, and I've been there at Metro for 17 years. And yes, there were some discussions about AI taking over some of the switches, the functions of a switch, and also some of the signaling, so they want to do is more or less testing with actual maintainers and more using the AI automation systems. But the problem is that some of these crossings that with this new technology they're talking about have like an antenna, so it's like kind of like wireless, and they send the information. The problem is if these systems get hacked and they get to the wrong hands, and they can really cause problems, and most of the equipment that we have, it is kind of old. The old relay um, system that we have is actually more safer than this new technology they're talking about. I mean, there's just so many things that can go wrong, And the more they're talking, yeah, it's like someone mentioned earlier that it's basically to control you. You know what I mean? Like management will find ways to like micromanage you. And they're trying to say is to save money, but it's actually going to cause more problems. And I don't know if there's any more signalmen here on this platform. If there is, if they can basically tell me, because this is my first time on here. If have they heard anything, with their companies that they work for?
I think you may be the only one on this call,
Okay.
but thank you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you. I can't expand on your question necessarily, but one of the hazards of AI-controlled signaling and switching, especially in Chicago, the train directors in Chicago Station can set up routes and then reprogram the computer. I shouldn't say reprogram, but do a little bit of mouse manipulation with the computer so that as soon as that train clears, the next train's route is automatically set up. And that works great in theory, but every now and again there's a glitch, and it costs some train movements when they have to reset the system and plug everything back in manually.
Yeah, I believe that's going to be a problem down the road, especially with us. The old system is perfectly fine. It just that now they want to, just have less, to me, less testing for maintainers or even testmen, and that's going to cause problems. And I think I read something earlier today about that they want to limit track inspectors. And that they already came out like the FRA that actually made it worse, using those new devices to detect problems on the tracks. But if we're gonna go that route, it's just accidents waiting to happen. I mean, like I said, if it actually happened where they hacked into the system, and they can really cause problems, derailments, or even head-on collisions if they affect the signal systems. So I think this AI thing is not a good idea. Because it's gonna really, really affect not only the employees but the public as well.
Matt, Jacob,
I just wanted to say that I'm just listening to what these railroaders are dealing with there in the yards and line of road and dispatching and switches, and it's horrifying for me to think that there are actual AI algorithms that are supposed to do these kinds of tasks. If you had something that would actually do that better than a human, I mean, that would be great. But we're not there yet. We just really aren't. I think we heard garbage in, garbage out. Data is dirty a lot of times, and it takes people to analyze it and look at it to make sure that you can even create these models. And people don't like to hear that in high places. They get frustrated, like, well, we just want to do AI. Can't you just make it do AI? And it's not that easy. I mean, we really should be listening to the professors, those that are not being funded by big business to be doing this. There is such a thing as, good technology. And I do think those things exist. But the way that railroad or private railroads are running it, it's not in the interest for the public. And there's not even an idea for them. And that's what I think is kind of horrifying about this, is just hearing these examples. I go, there's no way we can do that. I mean, have you been in a self-driving car? You may have, and it's a very controlled situation. To actually have it that's kind of just free form or autonomous, you're going to, and they've had collisions and whatnot, and they want to implement that in the railroads too. You're going to have problems. And yeah, I mean, the legality of it isn't really clear. So if you can throw a bunch of money and have a fleet of lawyers, you could probably get your payments, or legally speaking, you could probably get away with murder, quite literally. And I would want something to work and to actually be functional. There are some good services that we could use that could actually save lives and whatnot. But it's not in the interest of, I think, corporate. And I think that's the point here. I mean, it's one thing to get to a point where we can actually share data with the other railroads, and that would actually help. But, I think the railroads, for the most part, are pretty selfish about keeping their data, because I think there is something to, if you control the data, you could control a lot of decisions, but it's not that easy, and it's not in the interest. That's all I wanted to say.
We've got Matt, Tom, and Ron.
All right, thank you. A lot of good input here, and a number of points on some of the things that have been said. And let me start with this. We have a very, very big problem in the railroad industry with how safety is approached by the carriers. I sat through a presentation at a meeting of the Federal Railroads Administration's Rail Safety Advisory Committee in 2014, in which two pilots talked about 5 key safety programs they have in the aviation industry, through which they took us from the deadliest year in U.S. aviation, 1985, somewhere between 300 and 400 deaths that year. I don't remember the exact number, down to 0 fatalities in the industry. I think it was in 2011. And every one of those programs focused on it was a cooperative program between labor and management that focused on identifying and mitigating causes, not discipline. By contrast, the railroads are disciplined when it comes to addressing safety. And the presentation really, I was there. It shook the industry up. They knew they'd been plowed under. Has anything changed? No. In the railroad, it's still about discipline, discipline, discipline. And we're still having accidents. We're still having fatalities that we shouldn't have. We need to see a major change in how these railroads approach safety. The way they're doing it is the way they've done it for. It's funny to hear them say at this point that we need regulation, we need laws to advance the way that technology is advanced, but their approach to safety is still back in the 18th century. That's got to change. Next point I wanted to make is thank you to Mr. White for his information that he gave about CTC. And I want to talk about field failures, because I think that's a big issue here as well, in pointing out how the systems that we have right now are fallible. I had a situation where the signals along the way showed that the track was clear, that I was good to proceed. However, my positive train control system showed a stop at a certain point that should not have been there. Working with what the signal said, I was fine to keep going. However, the positive train control system is not going to let me go past this point. It's going to stop the train if I try to go past this point. So I had to stop the train. I knew with the conflict that I had between what I was seeing in the signals there out in the field and what the positive train control system was showing, that what needed to happen here to correct it was the dispatcher needed to put in what's called an electronic authority to pass. That's where the dispatcher's saying, okay, I know there's a problem there. The signal is not showing what it should. I am thereby, giving you authorization to continue on. So I called the dispatcher. I told the dispatcher what's going on out there in the field. And his response was, well, call the PTC help desk and tell them what you're experiencing. I didn't say this over the radio, but as soon as the dispatcher said that, tell them what you're experiencing, the first thing that popped into my mind was, would that include anger, frustration, and bewilderment? Call the PTC help desk, tell them what's going on. They said, okay, thank you. You need the dispatcher to put in an electronic authority to pass. And again, I didn't say this over the radio, but I know that. That's why I call. Why do I have to call you guys? It's this roundabout thing that we have to go through now. where this person's got to be called, this person's got to be called, or just to correct a simple problem. But the system is, not infallible. Things like this happen. I also want to talk about, I don't know if we have, it seems like we have mostly railroaders on here. I don't know if we have anybody who's not with the railroad, but I want to address, what is the Association of American Railroads? We hear about them. They're out there in the press all the time, also known as AAR. And so everybody understands what this group is. It is the public relations and mouthpiece arm of the railroads, is what it is. It's the attorneys and the pretty faces, the attorneys that are out there to challenge laws and try to influence laws and all that kind of stuff, the pretty faces that are out there to tell the press what the railroads want them to hear, which is not always 100% accurate. It's amazing sometimes as railroaders to hear some of the things these guys say that is totally misleading, doesn't represent what's actually going on out there. But again, they're the ones that are in the press all the time. And the thing I think it's important to understand is that that's what they are. They're a mouthpiece. And they're there to tell, they're there to say what the railroads, want said. We, on the other hand, through our unions, through the RWU organization, that's where we need to be out there telling people what really goes on. Ian Jeffries is the president of that organization, and he's been in the press a lot lately. And the talking point that they're pushing is, well, all this technology, railroading has advanced so much in the last 50 years, and yet we're still dealing with laws and regulations that from 50 years ago. We need to change those, and we need to update our regulations and everything to reflect today. And I think the perfect response to that is, I would absolutely agree. We need to update our regulations. We have all this new technology that's coming in, that's being used on the railroads here, that there's no regulation as to how it's applied, as to how it's maintained, as to how it's used. We absolutely need stricter regulations on the use of this. That kind of takes their words and turns it right around and throws it back at them in a way that they don't want. And that's a great technique to use when you're in debate with them. So keep that in mind when you hear that. Say, yeah, sure, I agree with you. We absolutely need more regulation. We need to look at this closer and how this, because so much of this technology right now is out there. A lot of the stuff before this technology came in is very tightly controlled under regulations, but we have a lot of this technology that's come in the last 10, 15 years or something, that there's nothing to control it whatsoever. The railroads are free to use it any way they want to, maintain it to whatever degree they do or don't want to, and everything. There's no control over it. And that's something that we do need to look at. It needs to be controlled, and it's not. The next thing I wanted to talk about was, there was something said about them using this technology to get rid of a lot of the lower level supervision. And where I work, I've actually seen the opposite. When I started out railroading where I'm at right now, we had a much larger workforce, and we only had 2 managers to manage it. Now we've got a smaller workforce, and I can't count how many managers we've got. And it's because of the way that job has changed, that they now, instead of managing the railroad, are out there driving crews around, transporting crews around the yard. They've taken away the yard masters and they've replaced them with these managers. These managers are running the yards now, and a lot of them don't have the experience to think like either yard masters or trainmen even. In terms of flow control and the management of movements in the yard or something, they just don't get it. And that kind of plays into the whole AI thing. As we talk about AI and the railroads wanting to go to automation and everything, why they've put these people in charge of running an operation that really don't understand how to run the operation. Why are they not focused on trying to develop the technology to assist these people to more effectively manage the yards and everything, so that it makes up for the lack of understanding and experience that they have? That's something they haven't done. They're over here focused on trying to cut jobs. And this gets into the comment that was made too about cost cutting. Absolutely. They're pushed towards implementing more and more technology. They want for that a give back. Okay. The big fight over train crew size had a lot to do with the money that they were forced to spend to implement positive train control. And they wanted to give back from that. And give back that they wanted was single person crews. So far, we've been pretty successful in beating that back. So far. But that issue is not dead yet. And everybody needs to remember that as well. So it absolutely has to do with cost cutting as either they choose to implement or in some cases are forced by law or regulation to implement this technology. They want the give back. The give back is to cut costs, cut people. So that's absolutely a factor in all this. And finally, yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, we've got a couple, Ron would like to talk a little bit. So,
okay, if I could, one more point here, and this is on what Nick said about training. And it's absolutely a factor here because the trains now are 3 times as long as they were when many of us hired out. Were we given any training on how to do that? On how to run these trains? No. Are we given any training today? No. We were literally thrown out there and told, do the best you can. And it's interesting, as I said, I'm a lobbyist for labor, was involved in a rail safety bill that we tried to push through in our last session of the legislature last year. It was the previous session before that, 2023. And I got to a point in answering a question before a committee there where I talked about this and the fact that these trains got twice as long and 3 times as long, and we never received any training. And the jaws of every member of that committee dropped. They couldn't believe that when they heard it. And another engineer behind me got up and testified the same thing.
All right, we froze up. Ron, I'll let you take over.
Okay, thanks, Tabitha. Sorry I'm late. I had to go pick up a kayak. Anyway, I kind of got the gist of the thread of what's happening. I tried putting an article in the chat. It will be in next Tuesday's Rail and Labor News about the dispatchers union vociferously complaining about a situation that happened just the other day on BNSF. I would imagine maybe Tom White and maybe others who got their ear to the rail on this may have seen that. Pretty scary stuff. And for those of us who have been in the field, I've never seen it, but I heard it come over the radio, what we call a false positive, where the block ahead is occupied, but all of a sudden the signal goes yellow, or even worse, it goes green, because technology fails. The scary thing about AI to me is it's all it is really, as Nick was talking about earlier. I mean, it's technology on steroids. It's we had 2 million railroad workers 100 years ago. Now we have 200,000. That was all done without AI. It was done through all sorts of technological innovation, mechanization, and so forth. In many cases, which has been really good stuff. Like, I don't think we should probably be using steam engines anymore. So the diesel was a pretty good introduction of a new technology. On the AI front, there's obviously the safety issue, but I would maintain there's also the efficiency issue. Like with long and heavy trains, we talk about the detriment to safety, but there is a huge efficiency issue. 3-mile long trains take up a huge amount of track capacity, especially in single track territory, which is most of the mainline trunk railroads in this country. And so the same with AI, when you have dispatching systems that are going to more and more be coming under the influence of artificial intelligence, it just sounds like a nightmare. Computer assisted dispatching, CAD, which has taken hold on the railroads in the last, probably 25 years or so, as I'm sure Tom can attest, can be very helpful, but it also breaks down because there's nothing like a human being relating to another human being. For example, a dispatcher in Fort Worth or Omaha or Jacksonville talking to a crew in the field about the specific situations that confront them that AI won't understand and cannot understand. It sounds completely nightmarish to me. And the stupid things that I've seen, as a railroader in the field for all those years, watching really bad meets and watching just the horrible things that I assume are the responsibility of CAD. And now it's just going to be amplified, it seems to me. So, all in the name of efficiency, which translates into more dollars for Wall Street investors, but it doesn't really necessarily make for an efficient, fluid railroad. Over.
Thanks, Ron. I'm going to unmute David and then Tom. Go ahead, David.
Yeah, just trying to work my controls here. Anyway, I don't know how to put video on, but yeah. I was thinking a little bit about Cesar's comments. So we have a part of our railroad, a district that runs through it's kind of almost like a throwback to the trolley days. It's a train that runs right through communities. So there's a lot of signal systems over there. And they had this idea that they wanted to put in a lot more automation on the signal side of it. I really don't know what they're doing over there because I'm on the power generation side of it, but they planned all these new systems to install, and they didn't have the power to supply it. They realized we don't even have the power to supply the system, and that's because there's no engineering going into it. They just had this hot idea somewhere upstairs to do this, and then they realized that they couldn't supply the power to actually support the innovation that they were talking about doing. And I think this is kind of highlights the whole thing. It's a lot of, there's really very little participation from the workforce in all these decisions. We don't have any kind of, they don't come around and talk with us about how these things actually work and what role could automation or artificial intelligence play productively working with the workforce? What would be ideal, right? Or they just make decisions based on, in the case of public rail, they try to copy what's done in freight. And a lot of our labor relations department comes from freight, for example. So the aggressive stuff that we see in our contracts, it's because they're people coming from freight, got a pretty good deal. They got a soft landing over in public rail and Metro, but they use the same. They're hired because they use the same aggressive tactics that they use in freight. We're familiar with that. But I think the other weakness here is that, at least as far as the craft unions, we don't even have a position, as far as I know, on all this. I'm not in the major rail unions. I'm an IBEW electrician, but my union basically just takes my dues and doesn't do shit for me. But we don't have a position. We don't have a voice. We're not engaged in the discussion. And there's nobody coming around and talking to us about how we would deal with this. This sea change, that's taking place in general. I'm done. I'm trying to figure out how to mute myself.
Oh, I can do that for you. I'm gonna unmute Tom. Yeah, that's a good point. I know the BMWED does have a position, and they've been very vocal about automation and AI. But after that, I've not seen a whole lot. Tom?
So many things that I've just been listening to. Top thing that everybody who's a rail needs to remember is don't let automation make you complacent. I preach railroad safety, and I also look for things that cause wrecks in other factors of transportation, like aviation. And there are so many airplane crashes that I read about where things are getting worse, but the autopilot is flying it. The pilot is totally disconnected with what's going on with the airplane. And then automation says, you know what? I can't deal with this anymore. It's all yours. The pilot is so far behind the airplane, it falls out of the sky. That's something we all need to watch out for with automation, is you got to stay hooked up anyway. The efficiency word has been thrown around a lot, and efficiency to the industry means spending less money. there's another element to that. It's spending less money to do the same work just as well, not to do less work poorly. And then comes AI and the training word that I've heard several times. So AI needs to be trained, just like we had to be trained, just like the new guys got to be trained. And I'm already upset with training in the railroad industry. I call it instant expert school, where you come off the street, 28 weeks later, you're in charge of a train. That's industrial strength bad. So this AI is getting its information from people who don't do the work in the first place. So it doesn't even know what we do. And it is supposed to take over through some sort of osmosis, which is why you're getting all the wrong answers. I mean, even something as simple as you could study law books to learn law, and AI is being used by lawyers to submit a brief. And AI knows you're supposed to have citations. It doesn't know what that means or why you are. So AI is just adding citations and making up the law that goes with the citation. Just picture that when it's doing your job. And that's where it's headed. The current example is you guys in train and engine service have probably been the victims of Movement Planner, where you go on a siding for absolutely no reason, or you're in a standoff meeting, you wait 3 hours or something like that. Amtrak takes a dive and waits for an hour, all that stuff. Even at that level, that's not AI. That's just merely straight algorithms. And all that stuff was written by guys who have never handled train movements in their lives. I worked on 2 systems and got an argument with both of them because of the fact that the prime developer said, I've got a degree from Berkeley and you got nothing to say. I said, but you're trying to replicate me. Yeah, but what you're telling me is too complicated. That's where we are today with the status of what we're working with today. So AI is going to be a notch work because now the people who are promoting it are even more arrogant than the guys who came before them.
Thanks, Tom. Jacob, and then, so we're at 7:20, and so after Jacob, I think it might be a good idea if we start to wrap up and open it up for questions, if y'all are good with that.
Sounds good to me.
Jacob,
Can you hear me?
yeah.
Yep. Okay. I guess my video went off, but that's fine. I was just going to say, with this, it doesn't affect the railroads, but it does indirectly affect the railroads. Just like what happened today, we think of the fires that were happening. And wait, what? Oh, video. Thank you. Yeah. I guess I hit later. Oh well. And we create these AI models like Tom was just saying about these trained models. Where do those models get stored? Well, you need to store them somewhere, and a lot of these data centers is the place where they're going. I think we all know the problems with the data centers. They create a lot of pollution. They take away from the community. There are complaints on health concerns about a lot of these data centers. They keep people up at night because not just with the railroads, but people are, running their cryptocurrency crap and all that illegal, horrible stuff at night. And it creates a lot of problems and it destroys our environment, which probably leads to something like these these crises that happen, like I know at CN with the forest fires that are happening, the wildfires. So, it impacts, and we're not really thinking about those things as a community. Especially the big railroad businesses are definitely not thinking about those. The railroads are incredibly profitable, even in times of crisis. You need the railroads. So as a private entity, of course, they're going to make money. But Public nationalization of the railroads, I think, is the way to go, though.
Well, I feel like we could keep talking for another hour. And Matt wants to get a last word in. Philip, you want to get a last word in too?
Yeah, just hopefully a quick one. I think an AI problem that's already cropping up is adequately demonstrated on Amtrak's newest locomotives. Very touchy systems. I'm guessing if 90% of the computer systems were ripped out of those new locomotives, they would function properly. But they tend to shut down for any reason whatsoever. Too hot, too cold, too fast, too slow, you name it, they're dead. That is all.
That's not a good thing. Matt?
Okay, two more things to close, again, based on some of the stuff that's just been talked about here. Let's remember, and we have examples of this, that railroads will willingly implement the technology that they think benefits them, but when implementing the technology that really would increase safety, they are often resistant to it based on the cost. And we saw that with positive train control. At the same time, positive train control existed in some form or another for over 40 years before it was finally implemented. And we had to kill 25 people on a commuter train in Southern California before Congress finally acted on it. And that's led to another talking point that I use with lawmakers now that really gets their attention. And that is that I don't think killing people and breaking things is either an effective or an acceptable way of determining the need for public policy. The same time that the railroads were coming with their hands out to Congress, and we gave them billions of dollars in taxpayer money to comply with the PTC mandate, they were spending millions of their own money implementing these energy management systems that have nothing to do with safety, but allegedly they think benefits them in terms of fuel savings. That's the reality that comes down to technology. It's not hard to get them to spend money to implement it. It benefits them, but if it benefits safety, if it's going to cost them money, they don't want to talk about it. And the other thing that I wanted to bring up was, and this comes off of what Thomas said about providing power. They had to do an upgrade on the signal system on a portion of railroad here that I work on because it was malfunctioning constantly. The track is located next to a dry alkali lake bed. During storms, the winds that come up was blowing that alkali dust in between the rails, and because the railroad wasn't maintaining it and dealing with that, when that stuff got wet, it acted just like a battery and shorted out the signal system. So we had months out of the year that the signal system out there wasn't working. The part of the fix for that, it was the same thing. They needed power. The simple power that they had out there to operate just the basic system that they had out there wasn't sufficient. They had to put in a lot of additional resources for power to power the system they had to put in to fix it and everything. So that's something, data centers are becoming more of an issue nationwide as people look at the power consumption and such. So as these railroads implement this new technology and everything, how is that going to have an effect as well? Something we need to talk about. But what I really want to talk about in that system that they had to upgrade to fix it so that it worked right. The railroad actually petitioned FRA to discontinue that signal system on that segment of track rather than fix it. And they said in the petition that the system was unrepairable. Okay. Today it's fixed and it's working. When that petition was not granted, they went out there and they spent the money they didn't want to spend to fix it. It's working, but literally, I'm not paraphrasing here. If you go pull that petition out of the public docket, the system is not repairable, and that's why they should be granted that waiver. And obviously, that turned out to not be true. I see this quite frequently. So thank you.
Wow. All right, Bill. One more last word, and then Mark has been waiting very patiently to ask a question.
So far, this conversation has been pretty hard on the railroads themselves, and justifiably so. But what Matthew just mentioned is critically important as well. The FRA needs to be updated. We need to get some real railroaders in the FRA that understand railroading, number one, and their position within the FRA and how they can improve things on that end of the deal.
And preferably not railroaders who were in charge of Pan American Railways when that company was assessed the largest OSHA fine in Massachusetts history for safety violations, which is what we have right in charge of FRA right now.
When I get to be in charge of the FRA, two things are going to change. The entire country is going to go under one book of operating rules and probably one book of signal rules, and the signal rule will be upgraded so that a red over yellow is no longer restricting. It's a slow approach or a medium approach. We'll work on that later, though. That's it. I'm out of here.
Well, thanks, Philip. Oh, don't leave just yet, or just Mark's got a question.
I'm
Mark?
just lowering my hand.
Okay.
Okay, I'm following up on Tom Wright's point about cutting edge developers' model was expert systems should be a power tool for experts, not a replacement. That is not a popular position, but it is absolutely right. Well, I wanted to start out with a classical example that goes on every day at hospitals. A new patient comes in, they do both diagnosis with AI and with common sense traditional method. They do both, and the result is a much better result. And this is a general principle about AI. It's useful, but we also must balance it with common sense traditional methods too.
Thanks, Mark. Do you have a question for anybody, or?
Thank you, Mark, for your patience and sticking around to make that point. Great point.
But my own experience on the ground is rails to trails, of course. As an environmentalist, it works.
Well, if safety is last and making money for Wall Street is first priority, then where does that leave people? I mean, you can be an environmentalist all you want, but if the track side is completely polluted, as it is in East Palestine, who wants to put a trail through that? I wouldn't want to run it, wouldn't want to walk it, wouldn't want to bike it. Does anybody else have questions? Please raise your hand. All right. Well, I do want to say a big thank you and gratitude to all the folks who, as railroaders, you showed up and you let us record this conversation, because I know that that in itself is sometimes a risk, and we appreciate it. Hold on here. I just put in the chat, if you're interested in learning more about Public Rail Now, we would love to have you fill out our Get Involved form, and we'll reach out to you. Otherwise, thanks for coming tonight. We really appreciate it. Matt, Ron, Jacob, Nick has already bailed out on us, but Tom, David, Cesar, Philip, and there's one more, David. So thank you all so much. Zoom is now asking me if I want to play music. I don't know where that came from. Again, automation and AI. I'm like, do I sound like I'm singing? No, I don't. So have a good night, you all, and thank you so much for being part of our conversation with railroads in the siding. Bye.
Hi.
Have a good night.
Thanks for hosting.
Oh, come back. Come back.
Will do.